Hello everyone. My guest today is someone who has seen business from both sides of the table. He started out deeply in structured environments, Unilever and BCG, places where decisions are debated, documented, and de-risked. And then he chose to step into the opposite world, building and scaling a consumer startup where ambiguity is the default setting. Former CEO of Jetpac, he's taken a consumer business from zero to a meaningful scale, built teams across geographies, raised capital, and lived through the trade offs founders usually only talk about in hindsight. What I find most interesting is that he's not just seen growth, he's seen different kinds of growth: fast, messy, disciplined, and sometimes intentionally slowed down. Aditya Goyal, we're really glad to have you here.
My pleasure.
I would like to talk about your time at BCG and Unilever, deeply structured environments, and what changed from that structured environment into when you were plunged into the world of startups, which is so ambiguous.
First of all, thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it. Would love to talk about my journey. I think the biggest thing that changed is the gold plating, right? What happens in a corporate, or for that matter, in a consulting firm, is that the output that you take to your leadership, to your clients, that is much more finessed, so to speak. It's gone through few iterations internally within the organization or with your immediate sort of line managers, etc. But when you come into a startup world, the speed to market is everything, right? The speed to consumer is everything. There's an approach we used to use called MVP, and that's the minimum viable product, and that's the approach that you put that in front of the customer as soon as possible, get real-time feedback, and then iterate with it. So I think that was the biggest difference, which is like polishing and keeping something finessed versus, let's say, getting into a more prototype style approach, get it out there, get the feedback, iterate.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we'll keep that in mind. The MVP that we talk about, I think it's really important to churn it out faster and make sure that it reaches the market before someone else probably gets it out. We'll talk about a decision that nobody ever warns you about. When we talk about the 0 to 1 phase, they usually focus on product or funding. But looking back, what was the hardest decision early on that you feel founders rarely see coming?
I think the biggest decision is that you have very few dollars, right? And when you want to kickstart the engine, right? Product, you've got it covered. Okay, you've sorted everything out, right? Where to put those few dollars in order to get the engine running. And I think that is, in my view, the most critical decision, because you only have a very limited chest. You've already done your homework. You're put in your sweat and tears into the product, right? So product is good, but then where do you start putting the first dollar of marketing and building awareness? I think that is a critical decision that many people underestimate. If you go to the wrong channels to start distributing, it can become a very expensive experiment for you. And for all the few dollars that you had, you would run out of those dollars before you blink an eye. So I think that's really important. I think that is the reason many times you've heard some of the seasoned entrepreneurs talk very clearly about the ICP, the ideal customer profile, right? So how do you make a very targeted GTM for this ICP? Are you designing a product which is a specific ICP and then creating a GTM around it? Because if you spray and pray, it's not going to work. So that's the very critical decision that many people underestimate. I think that's maybe the one. The second is, I think, the kind of talent that you bring on board. It's a bit of a catch-22 that, okay, if you don't have money, you can't get good talent, and if you can't have talent, then you basically don't have the kind of growth that you need. And if you don't have the growth, then you essentially don't get the kind of money that you need. So initially, it's very difficult to bring in people who believe in the purpose, right? The shared sense of purpose. Because look, everybody knows startups are hard, right? Why do people actually do startups? The reason people do startups is because they're passionate about something, right? There's a common purpose, right? How do you, as a founder, you believe in that because, look, you want to build something. You're passionate about that problem. How do you bring people who are equally or hopefully more passionate about the problem that you are trying to solve. I think that's another very hard part. Many times people think that money will solve that problem. Money won't solve that problem. Purpose, people who are purpose driven are rarely impacted by money as much. People who are more focused on money are not as they're more motivated by the money than, let's say, the purpose. So you need to find the right kind of people. So I think these are the two things I would say most people underestimate: where to put the money, the first dollar on awareness, and second is what kind of people you bring on board.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering that question. So if I may take it to a little more personal level, at the time when you were running the company, when you were at the initial stage of its founding, did this seem obvious, the dollars versus ICP you said, or hiring the right talent? Did it seem very obvious to you, or did it become more of a hindsight, or is it more of a hindsight advice as such?
I would say the marketing dollar was, I appreciated that problem, that because I had, let's say, a few $1,000s and that's pretty much it. So where do I put the first dollar? I think that was clear. Team is something that I realized at a much later. So even the structure of how the Jetpac was set up, it's pretty much an incubator for the parent company called Circles. It was not like I was the sort of the quote unquote founder of it. I was the founding member, but I was not like the proprietor of it or promoter of it, like the way the most entrepreneurial ventures are, right? So essentially, how I can't get them excited about, let's say, the Jetpac purpose and say, hey, come on board, come build with me, right? Because it's still the parent company which kind of owns it. So the hard part at that time was to bring in people who believe in that purpose. That's something that I didn't realize at that point in time. But let's say push another 6, 8 months, 9 months, it became more clear that look, startups are driven by passion, fueled by the desire, hunger, growth, etc. It's not that easy to run with a corporate setup, corporate style, let's say, human resources setup. I think that was the big realization in hindsight.
Thank you so much, sir. We spoke about dollars in the first half of your answer. The first point that you made was dollars versus money. So let's talk about consumer business with growth and dollars there. So in consumer businesses, there's always pressure to grow fast. How did you think about balancing speed with sustainability, especially when both felt equally important?
That's a very tough one. And this kind of dilemma would be faced by entrepreneurs I would say almost on a monthly basis, if not weekly. My approach to this is that there's no one size fits all, right? It depends on the situation, but I'll be very specific just to make sure that I address the question. So what happens is that are you building any capabilities? Let's say if you want to slow down, right? Why are you slowing down? I think that's the most fundamental question. If you're slowing down to build capabilities, I think that's the right thing to do. If you are slowing down because you just cannot keep up with the speed, right? Or you think that you're burnout or something, then that's a different kind of a problem. The times when I had consciously put a brake to the engine there was specifically when we had to take a stock of where we were and we had to build capabilities, right? Like example, the whole business is we had customers in about 150 countries globally. 70% of our business used to come from markets like North America, Europe, etc. Right? So, and we were building out of Singapore. So Singapore was a very tiny fraction of the overall business, right? So you had to build capabilities to do the go-to market in other continents, pretty much, right? How do you build those capabilities? What kind of machinery do you create? How do you create the awareness with the customer, and so on and so forth? So if you're taking a break just to build capabilities, right, then it makes sense. The best analogy that I give to my team is that just because you are going at 500 miles per hour, whatever, on a highway, and you think that you should not stop, is absolutely the wrong way to think about it, because this highway ends at a certain point and you need to stop it. You need to stop. You need to reverse your car and move on to a different road so that you can reach much farther. So that is the way I always think about it, is that take a break when you're fundamentally changing building a capability. Otherwise, just slowing down because it's difficult. I mean, welcome to entrepreneurship.
So I really appreciate you talking about how you need to slow down when there's a course correction, if I worded it correctly, and to pick up speed in other times. So when you pick up speed, has there been a trade-off that made something else fragile while picking up speed?
Tech. Mostly it's tech. Tech gets very fragile. So let's say if you want to build something out and you want to launch something in, 2 weeks, right? Obviously, it's not going to be as comprehensive as, let's say, the team would do in 6 weeks of time, right? So tech, there's a term that the engineers use, which is called tech debt. The tech debt starts piling up, which is basically all the maintenance of the tech engine that you should have done, but you did not because you were too focused on running the car, right? So tech debt starts piling, and then there comes a point where tech debt just becomes insurmountable, and then you are like, okay, what just happened? A tech broke. Right, so we had certain times where the tech broke too fast for us to continuously throttle the engine, right? So we were like, okay, let's take a step back. We need to pay our debts and then move forward.
Okay. So we spoke about tech, and it brings me to my next question. When we define product market fit with metrics, when you felt that Jetpac had it, what changed in the real world? Was it consumer behavior? Was it team confidence or something else? And did the numbers confirm what you already felt, or did it happen the other way around?
It's a very good question. It's all product market feels like the taste of a cake. Like you really feel super nice about it, right? And there is no one way to define saying, okay, if I ate a cake, okay, there is this better, texture better, this better, that better. It just feels nice, right? So how does it manifest, or how did it manifest? I think number one is that you start getting a lot of good consumer feedback, right? So what is product market fit? Product market fit is where, there are different ways to measure it. Again, from a metrics point of view, there are some tests where it says, I forgot, but it says that if more than 50% of your customers say that I would really miss this product tomorrow if this product goes off the market, then you have a product market fit, something like that. I think it's called Simon Ellis's test or something. I forgot. You can check. But normally what you feel, I think that was your question, is that first you start getting rave customer reviews. Customers will tell you, it's an amazing product. I love it. Absolutely. Jetpac case, I land there and I just got it online immediately. We love the product. It's amazing. That's number one thing that you start seeing, generally feeling. Obviously, the team's confidence starts getting more and more firm, because then they are also reading those reviews. They're also there. I would ask the team to just go and talk to them, whoever gave you a good feedback, saying, hey, what did you love? What could we improve more? So the whole, obviously, it has an impact on this. But I think the most fundamental thing that changes was start getting great consumer reviews, customer reviews, and you are like, okay, this is clearly working. And how it manifests in terms of your metrics is that depends a bit on the business, but you start seeing more word of mouth, because people are loving it and hence they pass it on to somebody else, and then they're purchasing it. So that's word of mouth engine you start picking. So you start seeing more organic coming on your website or your app. So that you start seeing a lot of organic traffic. Number one. Number two is you start seeing a lot of repeat, right? That actually is the most important thing that anybody should remember. Like when you are building a business, don't worry much in the starting phase of it. Don't worry much about sales. Worry about repeat. Is the customer coming back? Don't try to start a marketing engine to say, okay, I need to reach 5 million people. No, you don't need to reach 5 million people. You need to reach 500 people and see whether these 500 people are actually buying it back or not. If those 500 people, let's say 400 have tried your product and at least 300 are coming back, you have a solid business. You don't need to reach 5 million people. You need to basically ensure that you have a very high repeat. Because if you don't have a high repeat, if you scale the business, right, the profitability will always be under challenge. Repeat becomes the most important, and hence, when you see the product market fit, you start seeing that repeat, because which tells you that, okay, the customer actually wants it and wants it again and again and again, and that becomes the most important thing.
Thank you so much. I think when you spoke about how consumers levitate towards your product, and I think there's an equal pull from the company or the founding members towards the customer as well. You tend to be very, elated by the comments that you receive, and you just want to keep pushing and pushing faster. So there are times when you might need to take a pause. We spoke about this in the previous question as well, the pause that is important. And is there a risk that is associated with not pausing early? And what advice would you give for pausing, knowing when to pause, even though the customers are raving about it? What would your advice on that pause be?
So I think my advice on that pause would be that you should pause when things are breaking on a daily basis, specifically, let's say, tech. If you are a D2C company, the supply chain, if the supply chain is breaking on a daily basis, your team is feeling the heat of that extra working hours because something is breaking every day, you need to ensure that the teams are not burning out, right? So you need to take a pause. Tech debt, I already talked about it. So if tech is breaking, you should take a pause. Now, if you're getting great reviews from customer, I think that's fantastic. Just don't expand it beyond a point where this becomes an everyday affair, that the breaking becomes an everyday affair. So take a break when things have started to break too often, and then build those capabilities. Sometimes you have to almost throw the engine out and bring in a new one. If you have to do it. But that's a time to do it. What is the single biggest asset in a startup when you are scaling up, right? Obviously, there is a system, process, and everybody talks about it. But the people are actually the single biggest asset. And what you cannot do is to basically burn them out with no light at the end of the tunnel. I think that is the biggest mistake, because people who are completely motivated, energized, excited, engaged about what the kind of problem you are solving, you don't want to kill that. That's the secret sauce there. So take a pause when things break too often, specifically impacting your teams.
So I think, we in an MBA college, we call this agility, the ability to quickly, move on if something does not work, or take a pause and then, course correct, if I may. So if I may relate this to your previous work experience at Unilever and BCG, both some of the CEO factories in corporate. What parts of training actually helped you when you were a founder from there, and what were some of the things that you had to unlearn when you became a founder from both of these very structured environments?
Yeah, good question. I think so. There are three things specifically about Unilever that I benefited a lot. I think first is the sense of the level of detailing, right? So initially, when I was going through my management training at HUL, I think they instill in you this whole attention to detail. I think that's super important. Many times people think that, okay, being a founder is about putting up that vision out and raising money around it, etc. I don't think that can be any further from the truth, right? It's the founder has to really have a very strong attention to detail. It needs to understand what's going on, right? And that's something that HUL fundamentally instills in you. The culture is so amazing, so focused on details. I was very fortunate to be under the guidance of a few very accomplished leaders in HUL who are my coaches and mentors, and they really instilled this detailing in my brain, right? So that is number one. I think number two is that it teaches you that business is not boardroom, it's trench warfare, right? And I think this is again another big learning. So if you've known in HUL, they in the starting, when you start, they put you in a it used to be called business leadership training when I was around. Now it's called Unilever Future Leadership Program. So they basically, at that my time, there was an 18-month program where they would put you in different kind of functions, different locations. So I had my rural somewhere in Uttar Pradesh. I did my sales stint in Bihar and so on and so forth. Right? It's all down on the front lines. Right? I was talking to the distributor. I was talking to the factory shop floor person, and so on and so forth. So the level of execution that you learn when you are on the shop floor, when you are in the market, is next level, and that's trench warfare. It's not a boardroom combat; it's a trench warfare. Even I remember when HUL was led by Mr. Nitin Paranjpe, I think a few years back, and I think he took over in 2008, 2009, and I still remember that when he would visit the markets, right, he would go and start going and talking to retailers and distributors, etc., to get a pulse. And many of the leaders do it, and obviously that kind of behavior becomes really inspiring for us. So that's the second part, which is the trench warfare. The third thing is the people, right? How do you need to take care of people, and how do you need to build people, right? That becomes really, really important. And that's something that I really learned at HUL. Simple way to think about it is that the weakest link concept, right? If you want to run fast and you are a human chain, right, the what will slow you down is actually going to be the weakest link, right? Rather than leaving that person behind, how do you take them with you with the overall chain? I think that is something that HUL really taught me well. So that was about HUL. These three things I still remember. Fantastic, great foundation. I couldn't be more thankful for that. The second is at BCG. I think BCG teaches you three things really, really well. I think first is the critical thinking. I think the level of critical thinking that I experienced at BCG was unparalleled, right? I think the partners are like, they are wired to think in a very critical way, like how they will get to the bottom of it. They'll ask, like, go into the why is this happening, and why is this happening, and why is this happening, and then finally they get to that insight, right? That's why you see a lot of entrepreneurs coming out of consulting. It's probably because that whole critical thinking is just completely pushed into their DNA. That's number one. Number two, I think, is the communication, right? The strategic communication, the way they communicate is really, really amazing. Specifically, as you go into senior leadership roles, you need to communicate at a board level. You need to communicate to the team members. You need to communicate to the customers. The way they really like push the whole strategic communication, I think, is just next level. And the third, I think, is problem solving. I think when my first year at BCG, I came from Unilever, HUL, which is fairly accomplished organization, and I thought that I know how this problem solving works, right? And they basically took me to the cleaners, right? So it's really, it was completely illuminating how BCG used to approach problem solving. So I think these three things I really, really learned. All of these translated very well into when I made the switch at Circles and then eventually at Jetpac. All these skills were completely transferable, which really helped me make the most out of my startup journey.
Thank you so much. I think this reflection is not just something that you've learned and you are sharing with us, but I also think it encapsulates what we as MBA students or students anywhere really need to learn throughout their journey, either while studying or through corporate. One is that business is not boardroom, it's trench warfare. Then we spoke about people being most important, assets that you can learn from, and the company for different organizations as well. We spoke about critical thinking, problem solving, and the last one was communication as a strategic tool. So I think something that I've noticed across your answers that you've repeated quite often till now is about people. Mm-hmm. And it brings me to my next question that, you've built teams across continents. So what is a cultural mistake that first-time founders often make that doesn't hurt immediately, but could show up later when you work across borders?
I think it has less to do with borders and more to do with human psychology. I think what are the trade-off here? Let's be clear. The trade-off here is that you can hire someone because you have limited amount of money, right? Now, even with the people who are most inspired and excited, you still have to like pay them a paycheck, right? At the end of the day, they have a family to take care of. So what you can get in the kind of money you have, right? The kind of talent you need versus the kind of talent you can get. That's your biggest trade-off, right? Now, the biggest mistake a person can make, right, is to basically hire someone which was not the most optimal choice at the time of hiring, but then you only had so much money, right? And then, so what do you do then, right? And you asked me the question about more intercultural, cross-cultural things, but I would say that it's less to do. There are always great people in every country. We hired folks in US, in Europe, in Asia. There are great people everywhere, right? There's no such thing as saying, okay, this country is better or this country is lagging behind. There are great people everywhere. The point is you have to hire the right people. And who are the right people? The right people are, first of all, who resonate with what you are building, right? Who are not doing it as just a source of money, but actually doing it with, they align with your purpose, right? That's the key thing. So the trade-off becomes, okay, can I hire this guy really, or should I keep looking for it? There's always a time there's a clock that's running because you need to deliver something, or you need to expand somewhere, and so on and so forth. So that's the biggest trade-off. I think we did a bit of a mixed bag. We made a couple of mistakes here and there, but at the same time, we did hire a few great folks as well. So yeah, it was a mixed bag.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, sir, for that insight. We spoke about trade-offs. So which brings me to a question that I think most of us would have in mind, that if I have to look at your journey at Jetpac and translate it into the corporate or another startup world, what mattered more at certain critical moments? Was it raising capital, or was it executing really well with what you had?
I think in these two choices that you have given me, I think at one point in time, one thing could be better, on another point in time, something else can take over. So I have done both, right? So there are times when it's important to execute more than, it was more important than actually raising capital. There were times then, okay, raising capital was more important than actually executing. I mean, the assumption here is that the baseline execution is already happening. It's that incremental execution that we are talking about, because you can't leave your customers in lurch, right? So effectively, you're talking about the incremental execution. Now, my philosophy about this whole fundraising, etc., is don't raise it till you really need it, right? That's my philosophy of it. Can you run a machine in a well-oiled way, which can survive on that existing cash? If the answer is yes, don't raise. Raising, I know, is raising these days, I feel, I could be wrong, but raising, I feel, has become a bit of a prestige point. It's a bit of, okay, I've raised this money, so I'm going places. I don't believe in that philosophy. In fact, the venture that I'm building, when I put it out on the public forums, etc., a lot of seasoned VC firms and angels have reached out to me, and I told them that, hey, look, I'm really early in the stage right now. I'm basically identifying problems and I'm thinking of potential solutions, etc. I'm not raising, and I'm not be raising for another 5-6 months probably. Definitely not from the more institutional VCs, right? Maybe a couple of angels, but I don't want to raise until you really need to raise. Why is that? Because with the money comes a great responsibility, right? Let me explain that. If your machine that you have built is not in the best of the shape, right? You have a lot of inefficiencies in your system. You have a performance marketing where your CAC is going through the roof. You've not figured out the organic channels. Your word of mouth is poor. Your NPS is taking a nosedive. If you have situations like these, you don't need money to fix it. You need to fix the problem first. And then once you fix the problem, then you should raise money, because like I said, it doesn't matter. It's not that you are answerable to VC. Just because you have that money, you are responsible for it. It's a great responsibility. So only raise when you believe that the machine is in a perfect stage, right? So that's the time when I have raised. When it is more important to execute and to put the investment on a hiatus, it's exactly what I said, which is I would focus on the execution when your metrics are all over the place. You still haven't got the sweet spot nailed down. You seem to have a product / universe fit and not a product market fit. Figure out that market, figure out the product, figure out the systems processes, figure out the right talent, and then you are morally ready to actually raise. Before that, if you're raising, it's too early in my view.
Thank you so much, sir. As a founder, as someone who has worked in different environments as well, you've really developed a lot of instincts that have gotten you a long way. Could you please help us or highlight some of those instincts that really worked for you, and some of the instincts that you had to let go early on in your founding days?
Instincts. I think the instincts that has really worked is like having that business appreciation. Okay, hey, this will work or this should work. Like I think we were the first ones who introduced, I think, the dual networks, right? So, for example, if you're landing somewhere in some other market, right? Let's say you from India, you're traveling to Germany, right? And then moment you land, you have access to a couple of networks, 2 or hopefully 3 networks. So even if you can't connect to one network, which may not, at the location where you are might be a bit patchy, flaky, you can access a different network, right? No, consumers did not tell us that they need this, right? But we were like, okay, this is the most fundamental of any connectivity requirement, is to be able to connect, right? And maybe some of the competitors were doing before us. I don't know. I could not tell because I was not that focused on the competitors. But I think we were the first ones who started calling it out specifically, saying, okay, we provide dual connections or triple connections, triple network connectivity or dual network connectivity in most countries, right? That started working because we did a survey with our customers after I think about 6 weeks or 8 weeks, right? And most of the so there were about 60% of the consumers were already talking about the latest change in value propositions, which were a dual network connectivity, or we made the WhatsApp and access to Uber and Google Maps free of cost, right? So people already started talking about it. To my surprise, there was a big chunk which was calling out the dual network, and there was about 20% of consumers calling out the free WhatsApps and what have you. So that was like an instinctive call that I took, which was like, okay, in connectivity, what else can be more important than dual network? And then we went with it. So I think this sort of feeling that, okay, this should work with the customer and this will not work with the customer, I think that's probably one instinct that I feel I have. The second feeling is that what channel will work? I think that's another thing that I sometimes feel that I got a good hang of it after maybe a few months in the building process. And we bet heavily on influencer marketing. Like we really went deep into influencer marketing. When we had $5,000, we were spending $4,000 on influencer marketing. When we had $15,000, we were spending $12,000 on influencer marketing. When we had $500,000, we were spending $300,000 on influencer marketing, or maybe more, right? So we went really deep into influencer marketing. We bet heavily on it. There was no proof point as such which would say that, okay, look, influencer marketing is the right channel, etc. It's very difficult to track because influencer marketing is typically an awareness channel, not a conversion channel. And then when a customer comes in, actually buys it, they are not probably coming in directly from the influencer whatever asset that they have put it out on social media, but I might have seen it like a few months back and then coming. So it's very difficult to attribute it. But we went in with full conviction, and that instinct paid off. So I think probably these two things that I have a good sense of, I think that probably paid. Maybe third one is a commercial instinct. I think there was the whole back-end negotiations and everything I was handling by myself. There was no team member to do it. and we had a great partner we had great partners at that point in time. But having said that, I think that whole commercial appreciation, saying how much can I leverage from these guys? I think that's another thing which really benefited, because every time we were quote unquote running out of the money, this would inject a fresh, basically a money stream. So that was, I think that would be the third instinct that I would say that I built. I'm not saying I had, but I built over a period of time, which really helped me take Jetpac to the next level.
So, sir, when we speak about these three instincts that you've learned, or I think absorbed with your experience, and I believe today you are going to build or are in process of building a new consumer brand. So, what is something that you would do differently as compared to 5 years ago?
Good question. I think the first realization I had was profitability. I think if your gross margins are less than, say, 40-50%, don't build, right? And it's not a blanket statement, but if you think that you can sustain, fantastic, go ahead, build it. But I'm saying for a first time builder, if your margin is less than 40-50%, don't build it, because you will have to raise tons of capital in order to keep the lights on and keep the whole engine churning, right? So today, if I will build something, I will not build with a margin less than 60%. Period. I don't want to build it, because then I'll be in this constant cycle of raising money, acquiring more customers. You need to be self-sustainable fairly early in the whole cycle, because in the whole journey. And once you have good profitability, good sort of fundamentals, then I think it would make sense to raise money. So that would be the first thing that I would do differently. I think second is the team. I think the hiring, I will be much more specific about it. Right? I think I would like to hire more people who are driven by the purpose rather than, let's say, just the sort of the core compensation. Right? So I think I will hire more like-minded folks and more purpose-driven folks. So I think that's the second thing I would do differently. The third thing I would do differently is that I think it's not that what we did not do it at Jetpac, but I think the third thing I would like to do is I would like to put that purpose out more upfront for the consumers or the customers to engage with that purpose, right? I don't think we were able to do it. Also, because it depends a bit on the category. I mean, Jetpac is basically part of the travel connectivity category, so it's kind of connected with travel. People typically travel international twice a year, right? So we call it an infrequent category. In infrequent category, it's typically difficult to energize the customers around your purpose. But specifically from my new venture, I would like to build something which has got a community with purpose very early on. So I think these are the three things I would do differently.
Thank you so much, sir. So let's talk about consumers. Maybe try to understand what has changed and what consumer trends are changing rapidly. We understand that currently there is a lot of power in the hands of consumers.
Yes.
You've spoken in a panel discussion before that consumers have a lot of disposable income, and they are driving growth. So what do you think that trend is making it harder to maybe foresee as founders or as organizations? And what is the one thing that most people underestimate in that?
I would actually say that it's actually not harder to build, it's actually easier to build, right? Because the consumer is the boss, right? See, when it's harder to build, if power sits with consumer, when would it be harder to build? Is that if you're building a product with no differentiation, no USP, nothing, no sense of purpose, nothing that the customers can relate to, right? Then it would be harder to build. I would say because the customer is the boss now. See, today's customer is a really smart customer. I have to say this, right? Not saying that 10, 15 years back, people were not smart, but I'm saying the current customer is actually much more aware, right? So, and this is all happening because of how the ecosystem has opened up and the access to information, right? Like today, People can just pull out their phones and just search anything and everything. And even the pain point, the friction of the search has now been completely taken away by the Gen AI, which is you can just go on Gemini and then just search saying, okay, give me this, and they will give you everything, right? So the customer has become much more aware. They are consuming much more knowledge, and hence it's a very, very smart consumer. And in my opinion, it's actually not harder to build. It's actually easier to build for a smart consumer, because if you're an authentic brand, if you're building something very authentic, it's easy to explain it to a smart consumer, rather than trying to build a brand to just have that perception rather than the reality, right? So it's much easier, in my opinion, to build for that smart consumer. Now, what are the trends you said? I think there are multiple trends, right? So, and different industries have different trends. So, in simple words, what is happening across the world, right? And again, I'm now going a bit across the world rather than just specifically focusing on India. What's happening across the world is that the populations are aging, right? Population in most developed markets are now aging. Europe, Japan, US, and so on and so forth. Then there are, as our Prime Minister calls it, the demographic dividend. So there is India, which has got a younger population. China now slightly aging, I think in probably late 30s. India is still, I think, somewhere late 20s, kind of an average, maybe early 30s, somewhere around that, right? So the populations are aging. So that's the biggest undercurrent for everything else, right? So what's happening? You have, earlier we were millennials. Now you guys are probably Gen Zs. Gen Zs are coming into the workforce, right? Now, Gen Z versus millennials has a much higher sense of purpose, right? Gen Zs want much more out of their lives. They want their lives to be meaningful. They want their lives to be very fulfilling, right? Millennials came out of a time when, let's say, specifically if you take now the Indian context, things were tough. Most millennials wanted to make something out of their lives, and hence were like pushing in, let's say, available resources, right? Versus Gen Z is a much demanding customer. It's a much more demanding generation, I would say. And then as you go further generation, they become awareness of this. If you see the awareness versus in a boomer versus or maybe the previous generation, the awareness level has just gone completely crazy. Like the things that my 7-year-old knows, even I don't know, right? So that level of awareness is just next level, right? Now, so populations are aging. The younger population is more armed with technology and with access to knowledge, and hence their level of awareness is very, very high, right? The third thing that is happening is that I would say it almost is a clean sheet approach. So Gen Z looks at it not with the legacy. They don't identify as much with legacy brands, right? They identify more with saying, okay, who's more authentic, who's more clean sheet. I want to understand, okay, where is this coming from, sustainable sourcing, etc., whether it's good for environment, whether it is not, all those kind of things Gen Z is asking, which probably millennial never asked and boomer never even thought about it, right? So that whole undercurrent is completely changing, right? Then on top of it, you build the layer of how the different economies are moving. I mean, we can go into a lot more details, but because you asked me for trends. Now, let's try to summarize it. So what's happening? As I said, access to knowledge. Access to knowledge comes from, let's say, incremental data consumption. So telcos are seeing a massive spike in their data consumption, right? So post-COVID, the data consumption went 2-3x, and that's why we had to build Jetpac, because people had access to this data when they were in their own country. But the moment they go out, they didn't have access to that data, but they needed data. And that was the insight on which we built Jetpac, right? So that's first, for example. The second is now people are like, if you take, for example, food products, right, where I'm thinking of building a venture, people are much more aware of what you are putting in the product, where it's coming from, whether it's sustainably sourced or not, whether it's authentic or not. Are you giving me something that's pure or not? There are many brands who have built like around dairy adulteration, who have built around meat and non-vegetarian food adulteration, and so on and so forth, right? So the consumer and customer is becoming much more conscious about these things. So that's the second trend that you see, which is all the brands which are more authentic, they are doing really well. Then the third thing that's really happening is that the legacy players are getting massively challenged, right? Because their brands are becoming outdated. Some cases, brand doesn't even have a purpose, so people are not able to identify it. So there is a full, I would call it challenger syndrome that's going on, where each and every legacy brand is basically being taken to the cleaners because you have effectively a lack, we don't understand what we are buying, right? So these are, I would say, few undercurrents. I mean, we can go on into a lot more details. Can talk about US market, Europe market, and so on and so forth. But in India, I think that's few changes. Maybe one more to mention is that the customer experience is becoming better and better, and then the friction in the overall digital journeys are completely crashing. So I think UPI is a great example where the whole sort of the friction in the payment is completely gone. When I had left India, that time I think the biggest innovation was Flipkart introducing cash on delivery, COD, right? So from that time, now that I've come back, right, I see this massive reduction in the friction of the overall journey. So I think that whole digital infrastructure that was built now is starting to pay dividends. And hence, these are, I would say, the few underlying trends that I currently see in the market.
Thank you so much, sir. If I may talk about trends that are a little closer to my home, that is my college here, a lot of MBA students are torn between structured corporate paths and startup roles. I would like to ask you, what do you think is the wrong way to think about that choice? Is it more about personality, timing, or risk appetite? What should they optimize? And what would you suggest in that if you were in that place?
It's a hot question. There have been a lot of recent statements around it. So look, I think I don't subscribe to either I don't subscribe to a very rigid sort of answer to it. I subscribe to a framework, right? So I'll give you the framework that I would suggest and recommend to the young budding talent who wants to do something in their lives and careers, right? So I think first of all, you should know thyself, right? So know thyself and understand like what you like and what you don't like. And let me give you a very specific example, and I'm not trying to I don't know, I want to ensure that you have a very clear framework. So do you enjoy a more controlled environment where you learn from somebody and like a more, I would say, prescriptive learning? There's nothing wrong with it, by the way. I had some amazing amount of prescriptive learning. I think it's fantastic. So do you enjoy a bit more prescriptive learning where somebody is hand-holding you, guiding you, your manager is building you well, and then taking you to the next level, throwing you in the deep end, but there is always somebody to sort of jump into the pool and get you out in case you start drowning, right? That's one. Do you enjoy that? Second is, do you learn, enjoy by doing it yourself, failing and then doing it again, and then failing and do it again, and the process, this virtuous cycle of growth and actually learning something really amazing out of it. So is that what you enjoy? So the choice is depends on you, right? Somebody who learns better in a more prescriptive environment, in a more controlled environment, more, I would say, nurturing environment, I think is probably more suited for a few years in corporate initially. Maybe you can, I mean, corporate is not a bad career. You can make a great career because the impact is huge, the scale is huge. So you should start there. Consulting, very similar. You want to start consulting, again, going in for some really well-structured learning, right? Compared to a startup. Startup is like it's a mayhem, right? In startup, like you are basically doing everything by yourself, right? Today, if I want to build a new product, I'm in the kitchen myself. I am squeezing a mango. I am doing all the drying or whatever I have to do. I am building the spices and the dips and everything by myself, right? It's completely, you are on your own, right? That's basically, think of it as like, okay, you want to learn to swim. You jump into the pool, start swimming. That's it. It's as simple as that. Versus, let's say, corporate environment where there'll be somebody to teach you. So these are the two choices. I think consulting is somewhere in between, I would say. Corporate is, I would put it on this side of the spectrum, and startup on this side of the spectrum. Now, you should understand what works for you. That's the most important thing. If you learn more sort of well-structured learning, don't jump into a startup. If you like more mayhem, learning by doing, as they call it. If you like more learning by doing, don't go into a corporate where you would, again, corporate is a broad brush. There are many companies out there who have now created really, really tailor-made development programs, but generally speaking, they're more structured, and hence you may not have as much space to experiment versus, let's say, a wild, wild west in startups.
Thank you so much for the advice on choosing what type of learning suits oneself. That is either hand-holding or learning by doing. If I may ask you, so maybe to conclude this conversation, that if someone is listening to this podcast or this conversation a few years from now and has to remember just one lesson from your journey, what would you want that to be?
What would that be? Build for profitability, build with a purpose. Don't raise funding unless you really need to. That's what I would want folks to remember.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it has been a really insightful conversation, and I'm sure your advice will reach everyone who views this and will definitely learn from this experience. Something that I personally took away from our conversation today is that business is not boardrooms, it's trench warfare. And I believe that I will adapt my strategies accordingly when I'm learning and when I'm into the corporate world or startup world as well. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. To you, all you guys, and also to XLRI. Thank you very much for having me. I think you're doing a fab job with building the young talent of the future. My best wishes, and again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.